Welcome back to the Tectonic Takes podcast, where you don't just get one quality signing in a position per window. Somehow we got two. Abram, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I have hope. That's not something I can always say as a Quakes fan, but definitely a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, I guess the mindset for this transfer window when it came to addressing the forward position, they had two quality options, and they said, "Por qué no los dos?" Right?
Right? No, they literally did say "Porque no los dos" when asked which one of you should start, and I think it was Josef Martinez who said why not both. Which is good to hear.
Right. If I were to tell you that now we have representatives of all three South American countries from the former Gran Colombia, would you know which three countries I'm talking about?
Sorry. Oh, you mean the because Venezuela, Ecuador, and Colombia have the same colors?
Yes, there you
Yeah.
go. See,
Okay, I had no idea what you
a
were
little bit
talking
hard.
about, but I put
I
together the
went,
context clues, and yeah.
yeah, I went a little bit hard on the trivia in our last episode, so I had to dial it back. There we go. That's the trivia for today. All
I'm
right,
sure there'll be
so
more. I'm still
there will
waiting
be
for more.
more in the future for sure. Um, But yeah, we're going to start with the first one that was announced. Chicho Arango. We'll talk a little bit about him, his past clubs, his experience, and where he's at now in his career. So, starting with Christian Chicho Arango, he is 29 years old. He'll turn 30 in March. Native of Medellin, Colombia. He started his career with Envigado, and then within that time frame, he had a brief loan spell with Valencia's B team before he made a permanent transfer first to Millonarios, which is a big club in Colombia, and then spent a couple years in Benfica. He didn't play for Benfica. He had two loan spells to Aves and Tondela, went back to Millonarios 2019 to 2021, and that's where he got on the radar because during that time span he scored 21 goals in the league play. Then he went to LAFC. He scored 30 and 51 league goals there. Then he went briefly to Pachuca there, but not before getting the MLS Cup and the Supporter Shield in 2022 with LAFC. Then he lit up with Real Salt Lake, 23 goals in 41 league matches for Real Salt Lake. He was one of their star players. At times, he was the offense for them, despite having some quality midfielders and wingers to support him. And uh, they decided we're gonna switch things up. They traded us, and that worked out well because now we have a glaring hole that was needed to be filled with Jeremy Abobasi going, and I think people are going to be very happy with the quality of player we have at this point. I think of the two uh, forwards we're going to be talking about today, he's probably going to have a higher floor and ceiling going into this 2025 season. He's at the peak of his powers. And in the case of Josef Martinez, he did have that injury setback in his career, so advantage Chicho Arango on that sense. But of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that one's going to start, one's going to be off the bench, because of course, one of the biggest press conference clips that came from this Wednesday was we can start both of them, leaving that um, as a possibility because, of course, with Bruce Arena, he can tinker with formations. He's not afraid to run two forwards, even in 2025, when almost the rest of the world, including MLS, has kind of moved on from that. And I do say that with, the mid 2010s, I feel like even before it was kind of cool to get away from two forwards in particular. Almost everyone had a 4-2-3-1 in some of those seasons. But your initial thoughts on Chicho Arango, Abram?
Yeah, I mean, I want to address that there is some controversy, but we don't know any facts about said controversy, so we're not going to make any statements on this podcast. What we're going to talk about is him as a soccer player. That's what
Mm-hmm.
we know, and that's what we're going to talk about. And as a soccer player, he's an incredible player, right? In this league, I think you mentioned 30 something goals and 50 something games for LAFC.
Right.
That's almost a goal every other game. That's more than a goal every other game.
Yeah.
That's incredible output. And if we had someone like that at we haven't had anyone who could do that since Wando, and even Wando wasn't putting up that many numbers since like 2012. That's when he was doing that. But no, he's an incredible player. He was, like you said, the focal point for the attack at RSL, and was kind of the main reason that they were dangerous for the period that they were. He was a bastard to play against, and I expect the same for him doing that for our team now.
Yeah, I think in terms of excitement levels for this signing, you'd have to go a bit far back for that because, with all due respect to some of the other signings we've had, they didn't have quite the fanfare that maybe in some cases, definitely for Christian Espinoza, that they were due at the time. Christian Espinoza came in and he didn't feature a lot for Villarreal, so it was a bit of a gamble initially, and it's a gamble that's more than paid off. And the only reason why I disqualify Hernan Lopez from that top pedestal of hyped signing is because it was mid-season. So rather than having the entire offseason to build up that excitement with the opening day, he did get an opportunity to play in a big game in his debut, even if it wasn't for a full 90. But I think that it also helps that whether or not a player comes from MLS or from Europe, I think sometimes that gets overblown a bit, but because there's that familiarity, especially in the Western Conference, especially with LAFC, the types of players that you usually expect to get from Galaxy and LAFC, they don't tend to be key players for them at the time they were there. I think of Preston Judd, for example. He was coming off the bench more often than not because of the presence of Chicharito and Jovic. So he had an opportunity to get some extended playing time, and he's still going to get some opportunities here. They're just going to be a bit more limited because not one, but two high profile forwards are coming in. But this is exciting. This is the type of player that people are going to want to see. I'm not gonna go as far and say that it's gonna drastically raise attendance for a lot of our random matches, like mid-season hosting Colorado Rapids, something like that, or a midweek fixture, but that people are going to be more willing to come to the San Jose Earthquakes because they didn't have many reasons to want to come to this uh, watch this team play prior to these signings. The moves that have been made, just shuffling the deck with New England Revolution, they were roster moves, sure, but they weren't exciting upgrades to the team in the sense that, okay, are we really going to be a potential playoff team? Now people are starting to think of the possibilities that we could go to the playoffs, which I'm not quite there yet. I think we need to play at least a few games. I think that that's kind of the proving ground that has to happen first because of how poor the previous season was. But the fact that I'm not quite as paranoid as is this going to be a disaster like this season, that I can start to just focus on the possibilities of this next season, that's exciting for me.
No, yeah, I agree. There's like I said at the top of the show, there's a lot to be excited about. Chicho Arango and Josef Martinez. These are two of the best players. I mean, Josef Martinez is a little bit past his prime, but he had a great year last year. He had a better year than Jeremy Abobasi, and Jeremy didn't have the best year, so that's not the best standard. But Josef was written off, and then for Montreal actually had a good season, put up double digits in goals. And Chicho Arango, I don't know if you guys remember, but he was in the MVP talk at the beginning of the season before his
First
suspension.
half of the season,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was up with Messi for goal contributions. And that was huge. So, and we all know what Messi could do. So to be in the same league, putting up similar numbers as him, is great. And I think that if you took out Luis Suarez, I might be forgetting someone, but who is better than Chicho Arango and proven in this league? I can't think of many players. If I'm missing someone other than Luis Suarez, forgive me, but there's probably not many.
In terms of straight up forwards, of course.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
striker.
Yeah. Striker, yeah, to be even more specific. Because, yeah, look at the two teams that were in the MLS Cup final this past season. You're looking at guys like Joveljic and Van Zier as your marquee strikers in that game, which are really good, but you could argue that Chicho Arango is much better than them.
Yeah, I would 100% argue that he is better than them. You know, he did have a drop off last year, but that was following a suspension, and it seemed like it was a very tenuous situation there. So probably it's fair to say his mind wasn't 100% focused on his soccer. Um, Hopefully, we can provide an environment here where he's just all out, here to play. He seems happy with the his new supporting cast. Honestly, I can't think of many players he's played with that would be as good at that specific thing as Christian Espinosa at making chances. Like from his position, he's probably one of the best in the league. Uh, Obviously,
Yeah,
there's
I mean, he
Messi,
had Miguel Almiron for those good years for sure, and you could argue Ezekiel Barco is worthy of being mentioned there.
of course.
But I agree. And one thing that does give me faith about Josef Martinez is that he is doing this for Montreal. He did this with Montreal. This isn't a guy being plucked out like Inter Miami, for example, like Campagna. So Campagna, he's now going to New England Revolution. He's going to have Carlos Gil, so that's still a good situation to be in, but it's a bit of a different situation compared to all the great players that Inter Miami had, and of course Messi being the chief among them. Now you're going from a similar situation in Montreal, similar level of help that you had there, and now you're going to San Jose Earthquakes. And another thing that I want to mention is that both of these players, they've been on their international radars. Of course, Josef Martinez at his peak, he was one of the key players for Venezuela. Probably not as accomplished for his national team as, say, Salomon Rondon, but he's definitely someone that he was on the preliminary roster in the 2024 Copa America. Had he had the finish to his 2024 MLS season at the beginning of it, he makes that roster. Chicho Arango, the only reason why he wouldn't make a Colombian roster is because Colombia has a lot of depth once again, and there's just a lot of great players ahead of him. That's, par for the course. Colombia is the third deepest team. Uruguay, you could argue, but they're in that tier of like really good South American teams just below Argentina and Brazil. So it's tough competition there.
Ivan, the point you brought up with Colombia having a deep squad reminded me that there are two very good Colombian forwards in MLS who would be competing with Chicho Arango that I totally forgot about. So
Yeah, Cucho
Cucho
Hernandez is
Hernandez,
actually gotten call-ups.
and
Yeah,
Luis
that's a
Murillo.
level of competition. Yeah.
And then, so those are two just in MLS alone, and I'm sure there's more out there.
But you know what? That's not the worst thing because if we can have as many of our guys, as much as we'd love them to be in the national team whenever they get the opportunity, if we have some of our key players that maybe are getting snubbed from the national team, usually what happens is obviously we get them for the MLS games. MLS, get your together, like please schedule it in a way that you do not conflict with international windows. Probably too late for this season, but maybe for 2026 they definitely will get that together. But because that we're probably gonna get some of those players that get snubbed, we'll obviously have them, but they'll also play fired up because they want to prove that they made the wrong decision not calling them up. So we can be the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's something that is very nice about having a French fullback in Paul Marie. He's not going to international.
Yeah,
While having a
he's like
Brazilian
what
center back.
100th choice fullback.
Yeah, we have Brazilian center backs. We have Argentinian wingers. I think the national team doesn't need Espinosa. It doesn't need,
Right.
Rodriguez and stuff like
Yeah, it
that. So
seems
that's
like
good.
those fringe guys, like if something were to happen, like say Carlos Gruezo, like I think he's still firmly going to be called up for Ecuador every chance he gets because as we saw with the Copa America, he still plays well for Ecuador, more consistently for Ecuador than he does for the Earthquakes. But let's say that Ecuador gets another influx of talent, and they're like, okay, Gruezo, you can sit this one out. Then okay, that's not the end of the world, at least as far as the Earthquakes are concerned. Of course, we'd like for those players that do have a chance to qualify for the World Cup and get on those rosters to be there, but we still got a long way to go before that.
And we'd be remiss to mention that Carlos Gruezo is not with the squad right now. He some fans speculate that he is in Florida near Miami at the moment. Have no confirmation on that. That's just a rumor. But he's not with the team. He's not training with the first team. And with the way that the roster rules are, we might be having to let him go, whether we buy out his contract or sell him to a team. The latter would obviously be preferable. Um, it's possible that we're talking about him, but we don't have to because he's not going to be here much longer. So that's just a possibility.
Yeah. So we did cover Josef Martinez's last few stops, mainly Atlanta United, Inter Miami, and Montreal. That's really when his career took that big step up in terms of notoriety. And of course, being in MLS, he's going to be in our consciousness a lot more than when he's playing for Torino, of although he did only score 7 goals in 58 appearances there, and certainly the steps before that in Caracas, Venezuela, and Young Boys, which is one of the most interesting names in world football, but not quite as interesting as the strongest are always ready in Bolivia to keep that South American flavor.
Go
But
Ahead Eagles is another name I'd put in the hat. That's just a
yeah,
very strange name to me.
this does not mean we're rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're simply a club in the Netherlands.
Yes.
But now the big question that I have for you, Abram, is clearly, nines and tens across the board. Two wonderful signings, forward position, you can check them off. We're happy to go into the 2025 season with our forward group. But what's the biggest hole left in the roster after that?
Well, uh, you have to think that it's the. I mean, we got a lot of midfield pieces, but when Grezzo leaves, or I say when, but it's. I'm
If that
pretty.
happens.
Yeah, it's very likely. I'm 90% sure that Grezzo's out the door unless we do some roster magic, right? Um, then you're missing a big hole at the center of midfield where you need a center defensive mid,
Yeah.
and we don't like we have Mark Anthony K, but the our Revs insider was not too big on him. We
He was as
have
excited about K as we were about Beast, and, good luck.
right, so that doesn't fill me with much hope. And so you have to think about what do we have there? What do we put there? We don't really have anyone else. I think that there's K, maybe Harks in a pinch. From what I understand, he's more of an 8 that could play as a 10. More of like a Jackson Yule type. Then you have Edwin Mendoza is coming up, but from someone who is huge on Edwin Mendoza, I think he's a huge ceiling. I think that he's still a very skinny teenager who would probably get bodied off the ball, unfortunately. And his main, attributes are on the ball. He's more of like a Busquets, making passes, looking like relieving pressure. He's that type of center defensive mid, and we kind of need a destroyer. We need someone who's going to take the ball back from the other team, which Grezzo was theoretically, and we're going to be missing that in our midfield because we've signed. I feel like we're fine at fullback. We're not like super strong at center back. We're fine. Wing, I think we're fine. We have Buddha, Benji. We have all of those guys. Forwards set. At center back, fine. We could do with some backup goalkeepers to help with the town, but I don't think that's a very high priority in the list of things we have to do. So I think that the center defensive midfield is where we have to be looking right now.
Right. I think the tiebreaker for me between a center defensive midfielder and the center back was the Grezzo situation. So I do think that needs to be filled. Would have been nice if we could have hey, James Sands, if you're not in quite a rush to go back to Europe, we'll loan you, or maybe thinking of some Premier League names that are no longer starting, like an Isaac Hayden or hey, Calvin Phillips, you want to take a 90% pay cut? That would have been incredible. But I think, yeah, that's pretty concerning. I still have faith that Rodriguez, I am confident in. The center back next to him, there's still a bit of an audition for that permanent starting role there. And then fullback, sure. Like, they're not the most exciting names, but they're reasonable fullbacks for MLS level, I feel. So if we can get a center defensive midfielder, those are the areas we do have to address. Center defensive midfielder, and yeah, maybe another center back, because the biggest glaring issue was the amount of goals conceded, and you have to continue to upgrade those areas to address those issues and to decrease the goals conceded. You add talent, you hopefully concede less goals. It doesn't always work that way, but hopefully, for the San Jose Earthquake's sake, it just has to. I think that that's something we hope can be addressed within the next 2 weeks or so. I know that the transfer window for MLS is slightly different in terms of the deadline than the usual January 31st transfer deadline that most European leagues observe, but that would probably be the best opportunity for the biggest pool of talent. But yeah, before we know it, we're going to be playing our first preseason games. Are you interested in the schedule for that, Abram?
Am I interested in terms of like how interesting it looks, or am I interested in you telling me?
Yes, I think I'll go ahead and tell you here.
I would love to hear
So,
it.
our first preseason game is just 8 days away. Time to be determined for this one and the next one. But we start with LAFC, then we have Monterey Bay FC, then we have time set for the remaining three preseason games before our preseason finale. So, Saturday, January 25th was the LAFC game, February 1st for Monterey, February 5th at 12:30 p.m. all times Pacific. Real Salt Lake is our opponent. February 8th, 1:30 p.m. we got the Red Bulls. February 12th, 10 a.m. we'll be at Chicago for that one. And then we close things out with St. Louis on February 15th, a full week before our season opener against Real Salt Lake. The storyline's already set in place. Chicho Arango will be unveiled in front of his most recent club before us. That will be exciting, but it's just eye-opening that okay, we got a little bit more than a month to go for this Major League Soccer season to get underway. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling like I could have used a few more weeks. Like I know we have so much to be excited about, and I am excited to see them play because I want to see us win games. But it was just so draining last year. I'm just like I've really been enjoying my Saturdays and not having to stress about Wednesdays getting off of work and getting to the stadium. So there's that aspect to it, and obviously we're so busy during that time. We have to stay till like 11 p.m. Doing journalist stuff. So that's just a new thing for me last year that I didn't have previous to that. That was just a new experience for me. But ultimately, I am excited. I want to see how this team stacks up because I think that there's no way that we could be worse than last year for sure.
Yeah, that's the hope for sure. And now we actually have some genuine hope. All right. ¿Por qué no los dos leading us to the playoffs once again? Before we wrap things up, Abram, anything you'd like to plug or remind before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to mention real quick the new homegrown signings that will be featuring for my the town FC. We have the Spivey brothers. We have Jermaine and Kadrian, KK Spivey.
Congratulations to you.
Yeah, yeah, my new children. No, Jermaine is someone who is like he's spent time with us before, and he's a very hardworking center midfielder. Uh, but no disrespect to Jermaine, but the one that I think that Quakes fans should be looking at very closely is his younger brother, Kadrian. Kadrian is someone who is being compared to Kevin Sullivan. That's the level of talent that we have in KK. Um, and that's a lot of pressure to put on him, but that's what I'm hearing. I've never seen him play, and the reason I haven't seen him play is because when I went to his academy game, he got called up to the national team in that time. So then he wasn't available to play that game because of obviously if he got hurt, that would he wouldn't be able to play with the national team. So yeah, the huge talent there. Cade Cowell level like excitement for him. Remember when Cade was like 16, 15, 16 coming through, we were like, wow, that guy's something special. So that's what I'm expecting from Cajun. Jermaine is obviously going to be a force to be reckoned with as well. Hopefully he can get some time in the midfield because Cajun is probably going to need to cook a little bit more because he's like 14, 15 maybe, very
Yeah,
young. So we're not like expecting him to be making appearances anytime soon.
but the
But
future is bright.
yeah, definitely. It's definitely bright. We have a very good academy here, and I only see it getting better. Also, keep a lookout for Will Ostrander. He's not quite signed to the first team, but he is another one of those players who are getting recognized at a national level by a lot of scouts. They're saying that he's a very good player, so watch out for him.
Yeah. I'll just plug a few things here. Make sure you're followed me either at Blue Sky or Twitter at Ivan Ornelas2. Also Instagram Ivan the Writer 95. I will be posting links to my Medium articles where I give you recommendations for which games you can watch. So while we're still in the waiting period for MLS to start their 2025 season, I got you covered with the best matches in Europe as well as Liga MX and some other surprises in store for that. And with the World Cup in mind, if you're curious about which players to look out for that could be a sneaky pick to be one of those 20 to 26 players on those World Cup rosters, I got you on the radar for those as well. You'll also be hearing from me in a couple of podcasts coming up that I'll link in the description so you can follow them as well. I'll be recording with Jose Tejas of Goals TV in a week. And a few weeks after that, I'll be recording with the Designated Players podcast to help preview the San Jose Earthquake season. I'm sure by then we'll have a bit of a clear picture as to what our roster going into that season is going to look like. And I'm looking forward to representing Tectonic Takes well in those collaborative endeavors and looking forward to this season. All right, Abram, thank you so much for meeting with me today to talk about these two exciting transfers, and hopefully they will deliver.
Hopefully,
Yeah, all right. As always, thank you all for watching. Go Quakes.
go Quakes.